Welcome to the Got Trauma Podcast with your hosts, Courtney K. and Monica Newland.
Hello.
Hi, beautiful people.
We're back with another episode. This time, an in-person episode.
I know, it's very exciting. It's very exciting. Good 3.5 hour drive.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah, finally.
To my area of Ontario. The lovely Courtney and her family's coming to visit me.
Yes, the Niagara region, the wine region.
It's a good one. So we're here doing it in person.
Yes.
And we are in a little bit of an unusual location. We are in a Airbnb. And
Old farmhouse.
Old creepy farmhouse.
Very.
This is what it is.
Look at the couch decor.
Yeah. And we got some vibes, eh?
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely some spookies happening here for sure. My ghost detector said that they said it was a good entity that was in the house. So
what did it say? That they were here for like
spiritual protection and spiritual guidance. So it was kind of cool because this is sort of kind of spinning off of what we're doing really with this podcast. And
we took it as a good sign.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, obviously it's always a little creepy when you think about it. Right. But it's cool. I'm a spooky bitch, so I love it. But
freaks me out a little bit. But yeah, so this will be fun. So I don't know if anything, may pass through while we're doing some recording.
Yeah, you never know. You might even see something.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see.
We'll watch it back later and see if there's any like orbs or like.
Yeah, that'll be cool. That'll be cool.
We're setting the expectation too high.
We really are. I know everybody's going to be tuned in to see fucking spirits and stuff. Meanwhile, just a couple drunk bitches on a couch talking about.
Hoping that goes.
Talking about having CPTSD, and here we are possibly just making that worse by being in a haunted farmhouse. But
yeah. Well, we'll see. We're rolling with it.
Yeah,
God's be in our favor.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, We're back doing it in person. A lot of these are going to be recorded because of the distance that we live so far apart. But it's nice to be able to do this and
just to
side by side being able to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. Dialing it in a little bit more intimately, right? So when people can, see how we interact with each other and stuff like that. It's so funny because we get so pumped to do this, and then I find like, right before it's like my mind goes blank, and I'm like, fuck, all the things that I wanted to talk about, I can't. Like it comes to me in like a ball, So it's not like. It's not very structured, that's for sure. So,
well, that's kind of the fun of this podcast.
That's true.
Right? Like we're not very structured people. Like we're just rolling with it, and I think we said in the last episode that we're basically just recording our conversations. So two friends who've been through some shit, and we are
trying to get our shit together now as adults.
Yeah, basically, and talking about it.
This is a really fucking dusty cup.
It's just.
Like, dusty is one thing. This is like...
Is the wine good, though?
I can feel it on my teeth. It is actually good, yeah. It's nice. I like it.
Chalky.
It is a little chalky, eh? It adds a little texture to the wine.
I did not, rinse or check the glass.
Oh my god, that's hilarious. I love it. Yeah, so we were talking a little bit about... earlier today, just discussing... Because I had a panic attack 3 times today, randomly out of the blue.
Actually, panic attacks?
Oh yeah, I hold my shit together really well.
Yeah,
but
it didn't seem like a panic attack.
Yeah, that's what it. That's how. So when mine come on, I usually I start getting really fidgety, and I'll start I do a lot of the EFT, the tapping, because I find that really helps snap me out of it. It's funny how it just comes on and it's like this, it's weird, this weird urgency. It's like, I need to go home. I need to go home right now. I'm 3 hours away. And I'm like, but why? What is this? I don't really understand what the urgency is to get home all of a sudden. It's really weird.
Well, because you're just what can I control? I can control the fact that I'm going back to my safe space.
Yeah, I guess I think that makes the most sense. Yeah,
because you're out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, but I feel it's so funny because I feel so comfortable, like at your house, staying there. I'm super comfortable. But yeah, it's just this like, I don't know, like I obviously like your mind is just rolling all this fucking shit out, like scenario to scenario to scenario. Well, mine anyways. And like some of this stuff is so ridiculous. Like it's so far fetched in left field, and I'm just like
the catastrophizing. Right?
Oh yeah, it's fucking crazy.
I do that. Absolutely.
It's so crazy.
I didn't know I did it so much until my husband pointed it out. He's like, what are you like worst case scenario for? Because I'm like generally a pretty optimistic person. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to like my own shit or like things that like a challenge or like a scenario, I assume the worst. I'm like, this is going to be devastating. I'm going to lose everything. Like, yep. And I go to like the extreme.
Always worst case.
I think that's a like a survival or like,
it's definitely from having, like the complex post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah. Because if you anticipate the very worst, then you feel more prepared.
Well, exactly. It's all about control, 100%. And it's really interesting because, like when the very first time I experienced anything to me, what was catastrophic, like there was lots of little things in my childhood, tons of that stuff. But the biggest one for me was when Haley was born, my oldest. And
well, it's a huge life event.
Like, well, yeah, I was just 2 weeks from turning 20.
Yeah.
And I just remember having postpartum psychosis and not nobody,
like, no one tells you about it.
Nobody told you, no,
or that's going to happen, or that could happen, or
no, and that's the thing. There was nothing touched on that at all. And I just remember having this absolutely horrific event where they'd brought Haley to me and I was holding her, and they'd also brought me a muffin and a butter knife and a butter packet. And I just looked at the knife and I was like, then this thought ran through about jamming it through the top of her soft spot. And I was like, what the fuck is happening? Like, and I was so scared. Crazy. I'll never forget how scared I was. And like, I just had a C-section like the day before. So I was like, hard time walking.
Yeah. And your hormones were like,
insane. I was like, I took the baby to the nurse's station, just a sobbing mess. And I'm like, you need to take her. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with me, but I just had this incredibly intrusive thought and it scared it. I'm like, I'm terrified of her. And like, this is all happening like 3:00 in the morning too, which, like you can't call anybody.
Yeah.
And then when I called
and
my
ex wasn't there.
No, he had to go to work. So he went home and slept. And, yeah, so
it's just the birth of your child.
Well, he was actually, he was really good. I have to like, I mean, I don't even know. I shouldn't even give him credit right now. Cause as time goes on, you're going to find out just not how great he is at all. But, anyways,
but you're alone.
I was alone. And then I called my mom, and my mom's like, well, I can't just drop everything and come and help you, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, literally, I was terrified. I was like, oh my God, I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know what to do. And then when I got released and sent home from the hospital, I was horrified. Like I had such a hard time taking care of her and connecting with her because I was so afraid of her. I was so afraid I was going to purposely hurt her. And I'm like, why would I want to do this? Like, I don't even understand.
Is that postpartum depression?
It's postpartum psychosis, they call it. Psychosis. Yeah. So postpartum depression usually comes, I don't know, this is just what I've seen.
A little bit later.
A little bit later. It's not, I think it's, like it's, baby blues, really bad. Yeah. This was just like an ultimate fear of, for some reason, I was going to stab this child to death for no reason. Like I love this little baby.
Yeah.
Like I was so excited. And then all of a sudden it was like this shitstorm happened. So interestingly enough, I was like instantly on, I'm like, okay, I got to go see a therapist. I got to do something. This is fucking nuts. So I ended up going and seeing a wonderful therapist, and she was doing a lot of trauma. What the hell was it called? I think it was a type of EFT. So you put these like things in your hands and they vibrate So basically to connect right hemisphere, left hemisphere, blah, blah, blah.
Interesting.
And apparently they use this for trauma, right? So like, and I'm not really connecting any dots here at this time. I'm just thinking like, this is just a big life event. Clearly it has kind of thrown me off my rocker. Don't really know why it's thrown me off my rocker, but okay, here we are. And then after that, it was like, okay, we're going to send you to go see a psychiatrist. Okay, great. Go to the psychiatrist's office. And he's, you know, kind of like looking me up and down, sort of like trying to get an idea of like who I am. So then I like explain, you know, what has happened. And I was very like open and honest about it. And just and the fucking craziest thing is he's like, were your parents alcoholics?
Wow, really?
I'm not even kidding. Within the first 15 minutes of sitting in that office, he's like, were your parents alcoholics? And I was like goosebumps. I'm like, well, yeah. He's like, you have obsessive compulsive disorder. The reason you have this, but the weird thing is he never told me it was CPTSD. I got diagnosed with that like this just recently.
Yeah.
But he's like, you know, you have obsessive compulsive disorder. So he's like, some people will wander around a car, you know, 5 or 6 times to make sure that it's, you know, that the lug nuts are good, or, you know, like there's different types of obsessive compulsive. Mine is intrusive thinking. And then once you start connecting the dots of being a child, that's all I fucking did was obsessively think about death, obsessively think about like, and mainly because my environment was so unstable. I just didn't know if I was going to wake up to a dead parent. So I was always terrified of that, or, you know, me dying, whatever. So like, it was just crazy that he was just like, so your parents are alcoholics. This is pretty much why you're like this. And he's like, were you an only child? I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, you know, you raised yourself. Like, you pretty much raised yourself. You had little to no support, like as far as, and in, you know, a tight family, like a lot of people, if you have brothers and sisters, right? Like everybody kind of bands together in that sense when you have, and for me, like I had a great cat, but, you know, but other than that, I just, so like learning all these things. And then I was like, okay, like obviously I didn't feel better right away. And then I was introduced to therapeutic touch, which was just this like little, you know, whatever in the mall. What do you call those? Like a kiosk? Yeah, kind of, right? So they had like a little thing set up and I went and did that. And then the woman was like, oh my God, like your energy is so all over the place. So then she offered to come to my house for like 2 months and do free treatments. And that was the only thing that helped me
kind of like brought you
come
back
out of
to
it.
reality almost, right? Yeah.
That was the only thing that helped, because the medication that I was put on was so like just mind numbing. And I'm like, no, this isn't working for me.
Yeah.
I'm not dissing medication by any means. It just didn't work for me. Like I just found it, like my brain was just like none, like there was just nothing there.
That's not good when you are like a new mom and like you're navigating all that world, because you like need to be on top of stuff, right? You need to be on top of your shit. Make sure that
it was just not.
So being numb to everything would not be helpful in that scenario.
No, it wasn't. It was very it was I think it was 2 or 3 different things they tried me on, and I was like, no, I don't want to do this anymore. So
it's definitely tough, I think, to find like it sounds like you met good people along the way.
Yes.
Which is like it's difficult to do. And then also like with medications and things like that, it's definitely difficult to find like a recipe that works for you.
Well, it also takes forever for shit to start working.
Yeah.
And then once it starts, you know, if you've dabbled, like for me, it was always the side effects. They've had horrendous side effects to everything. Now, again, because I have OCD, part of that could also be like I've made it up in my own head. Exactly.
Yeah.
I've exasperated it by putting it out there, sort of thing. Like if I read, you know, it's like when I was a kid and they'd have the cancer commercials and they'd be like, you know, talking about prostate cancer. And I'd be like, I have 3 of those 5 symptoms. But I don't have a prostate.
Yeah.
But maybe I do. Like this is, you know, like this is just that crazy cycle, right? Yeah. And, you know, going and I still battle it to this day.
Yeah.
And I mean, like I do so many different things. Like I meditate, we talked about I did Reiki. So I have all those tools and they're great, but I mean, like, I don't know how people are just like, I'm just living my life anxiety free. How do you do? I want to know.
Like they think that they've cured themselves,
I mean,
or that they don't have anxiety. Because like I think both is kind of fallacy. Because
well, that's what I mean. That's my opinion, and I don't want to again like.
Do you completely cure yourself from anxiety? Like that's interesting.
I just feel like anxiety is so like it's so subjective, right? Like it's so hard to know from one moment to the next what will trigger you. And I mean, like, I have a lot of fucking triggers that I'm realizing, you know, but the more I face the triggers, the less, less pull they have.
Right. Yeah. Because as soon as you recognize what triggers you, and I mean, it sounds kind of like it's like, oh yeah, that everyone says this. It's like true though, because if you can figure out what it is that triggers you, it's not that those triggers go away, but you can stop it so much quicker.
Well, it's just it doesn't have as much like impact. Exactly. So you're not it was like coming down here, for instance. On the way down, I was like super like I'm like, we should just go home. I just need to go home. And I'm like, wait a minute, why am I feeling like this? I was super excited about this.
You're putting yourself in check. You're like,
this shouldn't be upsetting me so much. What is the issue here? There's obviously an underlying little seedling. What is it? Sure enough, when the last time I was down here was 7 years ago, when we got the phone call that my dad died.
Yeah.
So that was like, that's why it's that my body
association, like
exactly. And it was like that.
I almost feel like you're gonna relive like that.
Well, it was weird, right? Yeah, it's almost like I was, and that's the strange part. It was like this dread feeling, this horrible dread feeling. And the interesting part was like it was like 9:00 that night when we were down here 7 years ago. We did our wine tour.
Yeah, I remember it being pretty late at night.
Yeah, well, my mom called at 11. That night. 11? It was 11 because I ignored her phone call because I was like, oh fuck, she's probably drunk and I don't want to talk to her right now.
Yeah.
And
she called me.
Yeah, and then she called you.
And I answered.
But it was weird because it was 9:00 that we were taking the bikes back to the place we were rental.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget the feeling I got in my stomach. Oh, really? All of a sudden I was like, I knew something was wrong. I could feel it. Don't you remember when I got back, I went to the bedroom by myself?
You did.
I just fucked off. I was like, something's bugging me. I don't know what's bothering me, but I felt like this very like, I felt deep sadness. That's the only way I can describe it. And I didn't know why. And then it was like,
you knew something.
Yeah. And then it was like, my mom called, ignored her call. And then like my boyfriend had called, I ignored his call. I just didn't, I had no capacity to talk to anybody and I didn't even know why. It was like, everybody was still up and doing stuff. And I was like,
because you were just like, I'm feeling uncomfortable for whatever reason or sad or whatever, something heavy. You're like, I just want to like we'd had an action packed, super fun day.
Yeah.
Really just want to decompress a little bit.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense that you would be like, a little bit more reserved. Also, like we were tired. And then, because I remember your mom calling me and I'm pretty sure I was like in bed and I was like, this is weird that Cinda would be calling me.
Yeah.
Not because if she would have called me during the day. It would have been like, oh, I know why she's calling. She's calling because of.
Well, she left a message and she's like, you need to get Courtney to call me back right away. And then we were like, yeah. And then that's when that, but I knew, I fucking knew. The weirdest part was, as soon as you said that, I knew what I was in for.
Yeah. I feel like I remember your reaction and it being very like almost like she hadn't even got it out yet. And you like knew.
Yeah.
Like it was like so quick.
Yeah. I just knew. It's funny.
It's like we were all like sitting there with you and we're like, what's happening? And this was just a couple of us, like, Courtney's close friends. Like, thank gosh, it was just our close.
Yeah. Our group. Yeah.
But, I remember us all being like, oh fuck, this isn't good.
Yeah. It was really just that crazy chaos of it. And the weirder part of it was, like, because my dad was an alcoholic, I didn't see him a lot. I talked to him on the phone all the time. I was very, very close with my dad my entire, growing up, but I didn't see him a lot because, once he moved far away, it just, it was hard to go and see him in the condition that he was in.
Yeah.
And, like,
yeah, he was looking pretty rough.
Yeah. And he, like that place that he lived in was it was dirty. And it was just like,
not pleasant.
It was hard. It was just hard to visit. Yeah. It was really hard. I mean, not that I didn't, but I had a hard time with it. And then, but the weirdest thing is, so on the Friday before we came down on the Saturday, like my dad passed away on a Saturday. The Friday, we had a random rainstorm come in, and Art's like, well, you might as well just call it a day and go home. He's like, because I don't know how long this is going to last. And like, there's no point trying to do work out here, in the rain. It's just just go home.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right. And then I just randomly decided to stop at the mall and pick up some shorts. And who's standing there? My dad. And I hadn't seen him in, I don't even know, like a month or something. I hadn't seen him. There he is. And he looked fucking fantastic. And this is the crazy part.
Really?
He looked fantastic. He was like well dressed. He
groomed, like
he looked great. He had come into town on the transit bus and was just hanging out with his little old bitty friends. And he was bought himself a new pair of binoculars, and so it was like gave him a big hug and went in and didn't think. Sure enough, he was still there when I was leaving the mall. So it was another big hug. And then he wanted to introduce me to his little lady friends. And we talked for a few minutes.
Friends?
And no, there was, well, because there's like all these little ladies that go into town. Yeah, he was like their
he's taking care of them.
Exactly. I would say chauffeur, but he didn't drive. He just sort of chauffeured them around, whatever. So yeah, and it was just like we got to see him, got to get another Friday, that was the Friday, yeah.
And the Saturday you came down.
And then he died the next day after having that interaction with him and seeing him. And the thing is, like, I don't know, it's so interesting to me because I believe on such a deep level that was a meant to be.
Oh, absolutely.
Crap. Like we were meant to have that last
100%.
So it's just wild to think about it. And then, like I said, coming down here and it was like, what the fuck is triggering me so bad? And then it was like, that's what it is.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, like you can't just like, for me with triggers especially, is it's not just like, okay, well, I'm triggered, I can't do that thing anymore. Oh, this triggers me, I can't do that. Like I don't ever want to be that person. That would be a terrible way to live. You wouldn't fucking do anything.
You wouldn't leave your house.
You wouldn't do anything. Right? Yeah. So I really do,
But when you recognized it, how much like better did you feel?
Honest to God, like it was like fucking weight was
right. Okay. I mean, obviously that's like a personal thing that happened. That's like a very understanding, like from like when you told me, I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense that you would have that heavy angst or whatever.
Well, that was like the first real traumatic event the first real traumatic death in my life.
Yeah.
Was the death of my father. So there was just like this, it was crazy. Yeah. Anyway, so, but again, like,
and then you had like 2 more hours to like sit in the car before you got here to like let that shit.
I was like, yeah, let's let it go. It was great.
Reiki on yourself.
I did some tap and some Reiki. It was great.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely worth identifying triggers. Like,
as painful as it is to like go through that motion of, okay, what is it that I'm feeling? Or like, what is it that I can pinpoint that this like makes me upset, or this is like making me react.
Well, the other part of that,
it's definitely worth it to do that exploration.
Like the other side of that coin too is, and I find like, we unfortunately also live in a society where everybody's like, I'm triggered by everything, right? So then you almost feel like
being too sensitive.
Well, exactly. You're like, oh my fucking baby, like everything. Now, not everything triggers me. I have a really dark sense of humor, so it takes a lot. But as far as like, things from childhood, or just like, like just identifying those things and being like, oh fuck, well, now that makes sense. That's why I don't like that. Okay, I get it now. And then it's, like you can move through it. So you have to identify it. I guess you don't have to be like, what's the word? You don't have to be like dramatic about it. You know what I mean? It doesn't need to be something that you're, I don't know. It's hard to explain.
But even if you were dramatic about it, it would have been very like appropriate still. Like if you'd had a panic attack on the side of the road because you're like, this is like that's still like, judgment aside, like that's not an easy thing
Yeah.
to have to remember and relive and like have that bit of association with. And like, then you got down here and you're like, oh yeah, feeling lighter.
Yeah.
Let that shit go, feeling lighter, understand that this is going to pop up probably.
Yeah.
And like, I can take care of this because like you can move through it because now you've like recognized and you like, it's valid. Like you gotta feel like validated to yourself. It's like, who gives a shit what anybody else thinks?
No,
it's only about like how you feel because you're the one who needs to deal with it.
It's so true, but it's still that like I am such a self-critical person, so self-critical. And I'm also a huge people pleaser, which like these are all things I'm working on, obviously. But
and spoiler alert, they have to do with trauma.
Obviously. So I find like I don't want to be fuck you describe it, like I'm just like, oh God, I don't want people to think I'm just this whiny little bitch and I'm just such a baby and oh, here's the trigger queen. Wah, 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 wah. You know what I mean? Like oh, this bitch is always triggered. Like so
fuck it.
Right? But that's the hard part because my brain yeah, my heart tells me this. My brain says, no, bitch, like you gotta be cooler than this. Like
yeah.
You're kind of a baby. But
you pushed through it. You made it down here. It's a couple hours, like we said. It's like 3+ hours, like 4 hours, really, to get from where you live to where I live. Like, it's a good distance.
From Muskoka to Niagara.
Like, it's not like it's like at the scenic route the whole way, or like.
Well, actually, strangely enough, the sky, even Dustin.
Well, you just took a picture of it.
The sky was incredible the entire way down, which was very interesting to me. That's nice. It was. And I kind of was like, once I also identified the trigger, I was like, oh, are you maybe making this guy pretty for me?
Yeah, it's like, welcome. It's all good. Like moving forward.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean. I'm a hokey bitch like that. Like I believe in all that shit, and I take signs from the universe, signs from I feel all the presences around me, from time to time.
It's good that you could recognize that. You're like, oh, that's a good sign. Or like, oh, like the traffic was good.
Yeah, exactly.
You like stopped and had something to eat. And, like everything was like smooth sailing. It's like you got over like your hurt.
100%.
Which was all like your personal stuff. You didn't deal with the rest of the stuff. Just fell in place, and it was like, oh, this is gonna be a good experience. Actually.
Absolutely.
And that is the important piece of like recognizing those triggers, pushing through it, making your situation better so that it's not like debilitating or continue to debilitate you.
Yep.
Moving through like.
Well, that's again, that's the accountability part, right? Like you have to be accountable for the fact that like your triggers are your triggers.
Yeah.
And, you're allowed to have them, but you have to deal with them. And it's, it's one of those things that you can't just like dump on other people. Like it's, sometimes like you do just want to run away and hide. You just want to say, fuck it. I don't want to do anything. I just want to go hide under a rock because I'm so tired of feeling like this. But I think, I don't know. It's weird because like sometimes, like I said to you earlier, I feel like there's like this level of self-sabotage because I've gotten to this point where I'm very, impeccable with accountability. Like it is something that I really am.
We've put some work in.
Absolutely on like I'm almost too accountable sometimes. Like it's almost like too much. Like I have to be like, hey, dial it down a bit. Like holy fuck, you can't take responsibility for everything. Like Jesus Christ. But like it's just that whole like like this is a shitty trigger, oh my god, this is, but not taking it to the level where you're just like shut down completely and you're just like, nope, just gonna lock myself in my safe space.
I mean, there's like, until you start recognizing that you've been through some stuff, until you, and they come like, you're talking about accountability and it's true because until you like, step one is like recognizing I gotta work on myself and I gotta like heal some stuff. And then when you start to go through that like whole, just cleaning your wine glass, cleaning the ghost dust out of it.
Yeah, so much.
But until you start like recognizing those triggers and you start like putting in that work, like it's such a like, it is like, it becomes a beautiful experience because at least, I mean, I have started to recognize that after because you end up like, oh, that heaviness, that like that weight is being lifted slowly. It takes a long time. And you have no idea a lot of the times when these triggers are going to pop up, and you're like going through life, and then like you run into like a new experience, as we all do, as we all grow.
Yep.
You run into these new experiences and you're like, oh shit, that's a trigger. Oh, that's a trigger. Oh, this is, didn't realize that was going to trigger me. Oh, okay. And you're like, but recognizing it and like moving through that, like it becomes a very enlightening journey as you are, because that's like, no one can help you with that.
No, and that's
no one
just
can do that for you. Like that is solely, and you're talking about like, making other people uncomfortable. I say fuck everybody else, but at the same time, like I get what you're saying, because when you recognize that there's all of these things, and it kind of like is a bit of a domino effect, because you start to like recognize one thing, and then you're like, oh, how does that correlate to that? And you're like, oh, it kind of does. And you're like, oh, well, that makes sense as to like why this group of activities, or this like group of people, or like this particular area that I go to, or these particular activities that we do. And you're like, oh, all of these are actually making me feel uncomfortable. Why is that? These are like kind of like triggers. This is related to something that is kind of unresolved, that you haven't let go of, or that you don't know how to move through.
Yep.
So that you can have a more enjoyable experience, because really at the end of the day, it's just like, just trying to like enjoy life more, right? Like
absolutely.
We're trying to like reclaim our life. Like a lot of why we're doing this podcast is because we've like wasted a lot of years of like being in the shit, and like trying to regain control of our life, because we had a lot of years where we had no control, and it was chaotic, and it was shitty. It was so shitty.
Well, you get so
and now we're like, no, we can
caught
be
in the chaos, right? And that you become so like
you don't know anything else.
Yeah, like it's all that you're comfortable with is the chaos. And I catch myself, like I think that's a lot of. Hopefully, you guys can't hear our stomachs growling, because they're pretty feisty right now. Also, I made a weird face at the camera. I didn't mean to. It's like just this weird reaction. I just couldn't help it. And I just like looked at the camera and made this weird face like 5 minutes ago. So when you see it, you're gonna be like, what the fuck? I'm like, sorry, I'm a kid.
We're keeping that.
There's just a child here. But yeah, like just the whole, what the fuck was I saying?
I don't know.
Oh,
Christ. You asked me, I was thinking about making a funny face.
I know, sorry. Well, this is how my brain works. Like I'm literally like there's like a squirrel in here. It's just like run, not just like chaos. A chaos. Back to the chaos.
Being
living
like,
in
almost addicted to the chaos, because you don't know anything different, and you're just like looking for it almost, because you're like expecting it, because you're so used to it.
Well, you feel
and you're like,
oh,
it's gotta
safe
be happening.
in it. There's a safety in this, something that you just knew. It's such a fucked concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
That there is.
I still don't understand it, but I get it. But I don't get it.
Stability and chaos, like when you've been a person. Well, I mean, yeah, like
I don't know. It's interesting. Do other people relate to that? Like, people who are trauma survivors, like, are they addicted to the chaos too? Like, we've recognized that amongst ourselves, being like, oh,
I catch myself all the time with it, and then I'm like, holy, I'll be like, okay, like, how do I? It's such a foreign concept to me to try and change the behavior sometimes.
Yeah,
like even when I'm having,
you're trying to reverse like actions or thoughts that you've had for your entire life.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to me to like even today, for instance, like I've had many little attacks here and there, and I'm kind of like, I don't need to have these right now. I don't need to do this. Like, but there's this part of me that's like, no, pay attention to me. Pay attention to me. I need you to pay attention to me. I need you to hear me. I need to be seen right now. And I'm like, I don't. And like we were talking earlier about that whole, like the poem about the, leaving the what, how does that go? The war.
Oh yeah, it's so good.
It is so good, because it's so very.
It's very applicable to like how
100%.
I feel like have felt in times, and yeah, it was something that when I read it, I was like, wow, that's incredible. Mm-hmm. So the quote goes, and I'll have to find out who said this. I'm sure I could Google it, and because I found it somewhere online, and I could figure out who actually said it and give them some credit. But the quote goes, one of the hardest things about healing is that the version of yourself that you had to become in order to get through the war that you were presented with is also the somebody that you have to let go of. Yep. The version of yourself that you had to be in order to survive is not the version of yourself you need to become in order to continue. You have to leave that version of yourself behind. So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
You have to create the person in order to survive. But once you are over that hill, you can't take that person with you because that person was for the war and the war was won. Like, chokes me up.
Well, because it's so true, and it's so hard because it almost reminds me of like a movie where like the enemies become allies, and then at the end they have to duel and one of them has to die.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's
you gotta let that old chaotic, like, person who was like traumatized go, because you had that survival.
How sad is that?
Well,
it's like there's just this really heartbreaking part to think about. It's like you envision this as like a person
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like a friend or somebody you're really close to and it's not like they're like just leaving your life. You're the one killing them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's like, it's so sad. And it's really fucking hard to do. Like
Yeah.
I'm still,
oh gosh, me too.
I think that's a lot of the reason why I'm still, dealing with the anxiety the way that I am is because I have still not put this other person, to rest.
Yeah.
I'm still, she still pulls out. Like obviously that's who's screaming at me when it's like, pay attention to me, pay attention to me. I need you. I need you here. Like you're not.
Yeah, and it's like that inner person
Yeah.
knows it's fading away.
Yeah,
and
well,
it's like
that's-
grasping.
Yeah.
And you're like healing, and this new person is like evolving, and the old person's going, and
Yeah.
it's you think about like it's been like most of our lives we created that person for most of our lives. Now we're stepping into this new phase.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful phase.
Yes, it is.
But that you're saying, like that old life, those old thoughts, those old, that old person has to go because it's only like
it's
heavy.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just it's like how, yeah. I think too, when you live your whole life in chaos and then all of a sudden you start to realize that you can live outside the chaos and you can have a very normal life. That's a scary it's almost like when they talk about people that have been in jail for years and years and what do they call that? Solitary confinement?
Yeah.
Like
when
it's
they're
almost
isolated, yeah.
It's almost no, that's right. That's the wrong one. What is it called? There's a name for it. Like there's like a conditioning that happens when you've been in jail for a really long time. Like you actually go out and reoffend to go back to jail because you're just so
yeah. That's very common for like PTSD survivors.
Yeah.
Like we'll get into it more, but we've both been diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress, which we've touched on already, but it is a form of post-traumatic stress. So people who have like gone to war, like that's a good example because people can understand it, even if you've not been through trauma per se, or you're not a trauma per se survivor. Like people who've gone to war, like, and they've built this brotherhood, and that's like their like whole persona revolved around being that soldier, being that fighter, going into action, going into war, whatever. They become so used to that. And then when the war ends, it's just like done. And it's like a whole change to their environment. And they end up seeking out similar sort of scenarios to kind of relive that because it's like it's familiar.
Yep.
And it takes a lot of work. And it takes years, I'm sure, to kind of sort through those feelings and recognize those thoughts and like actions and like how things correlate.
I feel like it has to take years. It has to. And that's
decades.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, that's why I really don't like looking at healing as being so linear. It's not a linear thing. Like it's not, it is so, everybody is different. Everybody, handles things differently, deals with things differently. And I feel like when you put a journey in front of it as opposed to a finish line, it's a lot easier to be like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
Because you're not pressing yourself to be like, okay, so I'm going to come out of this like fucking, beautifully healed person. I'm going to just be, like, like I'm just going to all of a sudden.
Like triggers like, oop, here I am.
And all of a sudden you just, and then you're just like,
here I am.
You're like, fuck. Right?
Didn't know about you guys.
Yeah. And that's, like it's, I really hate the whole idea of just,
like you're saying that like once you're healed, the journey's over. Because
I just feel like the pressure. I just feel like there's a lot of pressure when you think that there's a finish line. There's more pressure. And then when you're not succeeding,
because you're never hitting that finish
line. Exactly. And then every little like milestone you have, you're just like, wow, I just suck. I can't do anything right. Like, I can't.
How far away am I still from this?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's, I just think it's, it's so important for me anyways. And that, again, like, I just say this for myself, like, it's important for me. I feel to just not have I don't have an end goal. My end goal is, my
healing journey.
Exactly. My goal is, inevitably, the biggest thing is to instill in my children the ability to, be able to face their feelings, face their emotions. I am by no means a gentle parent. I mean, I am, but I'm also, I'm also not.
I don't know who made up the gentle parenting.
I'm not. It's not my thing. I don't disagree. Everybody do your own thing. I, teach their own. I'm not judging by. I know it probably sounded judgy, but it wasn't meant to. I just want them to, be okay to see someone have a panic attack and not internalize that and traumatize themselves by seeing these things, like being able to be like helpful to people and sort of like work through these things that you see, you know what I mean?
And that's okay.
Exactly. Right. It's okay for you to have that. And it's not something that has to be kept behind a closed door. Like as shitty as it is, as shitty as it is for your kids to see when you've had panic, because it's it's awful for them, obviously. But it's, if you take the fear out of it for them, then you're mending that wound for yourself too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Absolutely. So that's like a big thing for me anyway.
No, for sure. So hopefully there were some lessons in this discussion that, but like whether or not it's
some tidbits,
identifying your triggers and giving yourself grace to work through them.
That's a big
one. Understanding that like this is a journey. This is not just like a, like the problem's not just going to fix itself. And it's not like, oh, you're like, oh, I identified that trigger, or I identified like why I feel like that, and it's going to not happen again. Like, it's just, unfortunately, it's not like that. But you do, as you go through those things, like you do recognize, and you like feel a little bit better every time, and it becomes a much more pleasant journey or experience, like going through that, because you're like, you recognize like, oh, I'm making progress here.
Yeah.
No, this is progress.
Yeah.
Like progress over perfection in my mind. Like
100%.
We're looking at, having a good life and not reliving the shit. So it's like,
I feel like it's longer periods of a quiet mind, of a peaceful existence, more being in the moment, less being, here, there, everywhere, and just appreciating everything, because like we literally we live moment to moment. Like that's it. Like an hour from now doesn't matter because it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're not guaranteed any of it.
Exactly. And that's the hard part, is that we get so wrapped up in that
shit.
Stop living in the.
Stop doing it. That is not the message we're getting across. It's not that simple. Trust me.
No, it's not.
But yeah, what do you think? Do you wrap it up there?
Yeah, I think so. And good. We'll
we got more to come though.
We'll catch you next time.
Stay tuned. Cheers.
Cheers. Hey, I drank way more than you.
You're talking too.
I was. Blah blah blah. That's probably because I drank the whole bottle, or
I was listening.
Whole glass of wine. I was.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit those subscribe and share buttons. We'll see you at the next one.